the 29th already of March. It's the day after the anniversary, 44th anniversary. 44th anniversary of 3 Mile Island. I'm your host, Dana Durnford, and also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. You can call 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's having a reasonable day. If that's conceivable, on YouTube. How are you? Don't forget to give us a subscribe, click the bell. It's not going to work, but hey, it's fun clicking, right? There's many social networking sites out there. Consider sharing my documentation or chopping up the video and putting out pertinent clips, maybe. Don't fall into the trap of Spider-Man, the Hulk, the fake superheroes, and they got lots of them to distract you, to manipulate you, and to drag you away from reality. You even got GoPro Hero to get rid of the word hero, and Guitar Hero. The word hero is not allowed to exist in its proper text anymore. The nuclear industry can have a seat at my table anytime they like. I want you to remember that in the old days, we always got rid of our problems. And it worked. At some point, we're going to have to get back to the good old days. But meanwhile, we're going to fill you in on facets of an 80-year death cult known as the nuclear industry. The word leak, look, 44 years ago, they had a meltdown. Oh, they got a little bit of a leak down here in Susquehanna River. What made 3 Mile Island the perfect storm was it melted down just after the movie China Syndrome came on national theaters, right? Remember back in those days it was all theaters. 3 Mile Island was once too cheap to meter, now too toxic to clean up. We have models of cancer clusters. Now there's 1,800 diseases too. It's not just cancer. So when 3 Mile Island happened, the vicious scums were out telling people it was like drinking wine.
Affected myself and my family.
She and her neighbors continued to press for answers.
And when they started telling us about the radiation that we got was no more than a glass of wine or a cigarette, that infuriated me because in the state of Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to give my children wine and cigarettes, so why were they allowed to give it? And that didn't ring true to me because we later found out that the monitors that monitor the amount of radiation went offline. To this day, we truly don't know.
Years of
every single accident, the same thing happens. The radiation detectors all break down, which means you got a massive plume, took out the Geiger counters. Some of you will remember the story of Yoshi Shimatsu, a forensic investigative journalist with the Japan Times, who ran the Sunday edition, had retired, and he rode into the Fukushima wasteland on a bicycle with 3 Geiger counters. All 3 of them broke that day. Oh, and he lost most of his teeth in the next week and a half or so. But the claim that it's like drinking wine and smoking cigarettes, they also claimed it was like watching colored television for an extra year. We'll actually get to that. These are despicable, hideous, monstrous lies, but it demonstrates consistently this contempt for everything and everybody and every species. It's absolute contempt to tell the victims. Imagine what kind of scumbag you got to be to do it. To tell the victims It's like drinking wine or a cigarette. It's the ultimate arrogance. And anybody that does that to you is not your friend, or not a human friend ever. Reported enormous increases in cancers, infant mortality rates, birds disappeared, mutations after. The victims who ran away and were victimized by coming back found their dead pets waiting for them. What scares me was always this particular picture where you can look out and see the nuclear disease factory was right alongside of you. That is truly a frightening depiction. Shut 3 Mile Island. And they had every right to demand it. A plant. Like, you got a meltdown, they can't even call it the atomic plant. A plant. Mishap, leaks. Using the word leaks. Contaminated steam. No, this was a meltdown. This wasn't steam. The swing is real. I put the children in it and the radioactive fallout because just seeing the swings don't really do it justice, does it? But remember, every day, any children that were in that area were going to get incredibly radioactive. This was a plume cancer model. And I had a better version of that, I think, didn't I? It was a plume cancer model of within 10 miles. Now, radiation doesn't just stop at the 10-mile border. And we're talking back in the 70s. Radiation continues to leak. And you see that word leak? Every time there's a nuclear plant event, they use the word leak. The Monticello leaked 10,045 gallon drums. So if you had to move 10,045 gallon drums that weigh 420 pounds each, how long would it take you? A long time, right? And a lot of people, right? So it's not a leak. A 45-gallon drum is not even a leak. 10,000 45-gallon drums is definitely not a leak. Children and pregnant women near nuclear plant leave. But Dick Thornburgh, who was the governor at the time, a new governor by about 70 days, waited several days before evacuating them long after the plume. This is just one of the many models that showed up eventually of the plume. So 3 Mile Island, allegedly this is them cleaning up at 3 Mile Island with scrub brushes. Of course, that reactor never worked again. They ran away. They found all the homeless and destitute they could for the next 12 years and went through them. There was no nuclear scientists working there. There's no nuclear academics, and the get-ups they got on can't protect you from gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bursts, beta shines, beta rays. Nuclear reactor accident, leaks, and then the word steam. This is not steam. This is brutal radioactive emissions. This is a meltdown. This is fission products. And the incredible betrayal. And again, leak. The arrogance, the absolute contempt, to use the word leak, was plugged. Of course, in Fukushima, where the buildings are completely leveled, they said they fixed it with sawdust and newspaper and glue within 10 days. Of course, we know now that's not true. And you can't believe anything they say or show you. So it's impossible to believe that picture because of their legacies of lies and deceit and deception. Remember, Spider-Man and the Hulk were created by the nuclear industry. to brainwash your children, and you go out and buy them Spider-Man and Hulk suits, pillowcases, oh, they're kids, Dana, and T-shirts and Halloween costumes. You really think that that's a great idea? You'd be wrong. We survived 3 Mile Island. Not so fast. There's 1,800 diseases shows up later. Cancer's latent. But it's coming if you were there. Nuclear waste. But I mean, this was the end of the nuclear reticence for United States. We're going to cover some stories. We'll cover some studies. We'll cover some pictures. And we'll tell the story, a shocking story of documentation. 2468, we don't want to radiate. Thank goodness people like that exist. We will endure the difficulties. Mr. Thornburgh. We will endure the difficulties. Well, he didn't endure it. The people who stayed behind certainly did. America's worst nuclear accident, 3 Mile Island. Actually, it's not. It's Santa Susana in 1959. Santa Susana, I gotta put that on the other screen. According to the analysts of a 5-year study by a panel of independent scientists convened years after the incident, the nuclear meltdown, the Savannah River accident spit out, which is a terrible word to use because this is a airborne continuous plume, 460 times the amount of radiation released during the 1979 meltdown at 3 Mile Island. And do you believe for 1 second that the media doesn't know it in 2023? You think they didn't write that headline on purpose because they don't want you to understand that also happened? That should have been the end of the nuclear renaissance right there, right? And so there's a lot of major cities within 120 miles. It's zero problems for a radioactive plume to travel 120 miles. It's zero effort. I'll show you a model of Fukushima radioactive fallout based on 16 days. Here's what 16 days, when the model is about halfway done, you'll see what 16 days looks like. This is coming out of Japan. This is based on venting, by the way, not based on the actual meltdown. So similar numbers as 3 Mile Island. Covers the entire planet in radioactive fallout in just 16 days. But it never stops coming out. That's the exact same model you should use for 3 Mile Island. Their model is the exact same, where it's based on venting. And that's exactly what happened. And anything with a name on it got buried. But no, they're going to claim that 3 Mile Island is America's worst nuclear accident. Like, instead of running away, people ran to the nuclear meltdown. People didn't gather up at Fukushima after, or at Chernobyl, but 3 Mile Island, because the media done such a good job of disarming the population. Anything that is officially mainstream media is a pointless media. It's pointless to look at them for the documentation, unfortunately, and horrifically. Coverage you can count on. They got to put that in there because nobody can count on them. So it's right on, everything is downhill immediately into the Susquehanna River, which runs down through all kinds of communities and cities, and the water is used to feed incredible agricultural empires along the way. Unit 2 was permanently shut down after the nuclear meltdown. Don't call it an accident, call it what it is. after the meltdown. Cleanup officially ended in 1993. 1993. Which is 14 years. Cancer incidences among residents at 3 Mile Island, 1982 to 1995. An increase in leukemia was found among the men exposed to high external. Because you don't breathe air or drink water or eat food, right? Everybody held their breath for the next couple of years. And so there was only external radiation doses. External radiation. Imagine doing a study and not including internal doses. They claim they released 370 petabecquerels of noble gases, mainly xenon, which burns a hole through your lung and gets into the bones of the children in particular, mutates their stem cells, and iodine-131. So, this was unclear, by the way. United Nations, the human-hating, species-hating creature that has taken over our planet, UN, which is the same thing as ERPA and the IAEA and the IPCC. The IPCC. Nuclear power plant released noble gases. This is absurdness. It released uranium, plutonium, and americium, neptunium, strontium. There's 1,000 fission products. Because xenon-133 and the iodine-131 have very short half-lives. It's completely dishonest. And then only talk about external doses. Talk about a 5 mile radius. They estimated the average and likely whole body external doses were 0.5 millisieverts. Well, first off, this is physical particles. This is not fuel rods you're walking past. This is particles. So you count it in. Counts per minute, atomic decays, physical atoms, becquerels. They're counting it in microsieverts. And then cancer. Right now. Cancer. And cancer. There's 1,800 diseases. No increased cancer risk was found among those younger than 18 years of age. How does that work? I'm very confused by that statement. How does that actually work? How can you have an increased leukemia among the adults for external, but people under 18 years of age, they don't eat or drink water or get showers or breathe the air. Yeah, so whoever done that study should be arrested. 3 Mile Island disaster. We're getting a bit closer. And it's surrounded by water, no matter which way it washes off in rain or fallout. And look at all the farms in the background. I mean, go look up a picture of 3 Mile Island. Look at all the farms. You really want to see how evil this industry actually is. So we got a poll tonight, by the way. Was 3 Mile Island deadly radioactive fallout damage omitted by the heartless nuclear academics and professors? We got 31 votes. We got 100%. 100%. Now for some fun stuff. How Dick Thornburgh masterfully handled the 3 Mile Island disaster. Masterfully. Now this was a story come out a couple of years ago. I reference it because this is the cover story. He's dead now. Thornburgh sagely commented there was no Republican or Democratic way to deal with a nuclear crisis. On the third day of the crisis, he recommended the victims, like pregnant women and preschool children living within 5 miles of 3 Mile Island, leave the area. So we waited till long after the the radioactive plume had already we'll use this one here. You waited till long after. A friend of nobody. So it was too late now. And yeah, it's still okay to move out, but it was guaranteed that they got brutal doses because they were breathing in the original plume. He refused to issue a general evacuation order because it could create a panic. Of course, you're supposed to panic. You only got a few minutes to get out of harm's way. This is why, after that, all nuclear power plants in America would have to have X number, up to 160 in some places, sirens within 10 miles. Because you don't have time. Every moment is precious. So you would hear the siren, turn on your radio and your TV, and they would tell you which way to run. And if you tell you to shelter in the place, they should be shot on sight. Well, you shouldn't live within 100 miles of these disease factories. He refused to issue so he should have been charged with murder and genocide. This is a genocide, what he done. Millions of people got incredibly radioactive, and there's 1,800 diseases, not just cancer like the scumbags are trying to manipulate you with. He restrained unwarranted action despite the unrelenting pressure to do something, do anything. He refused to evacuate him because he was the high governor. His job was to evacuate you, and he refused to do it. Corporations always come first. You're irrelevant. Nuclear reactor accident leaks. Every time I hear that word, I want to choke a nuclear academic. Radioactive steam that would kill you right on the spot. You walk through a plume of steam coming out of that place, you die right then. Not steam. It looks like steam. It's radioactive plume. It's lethal. 3 Mile Island, this was 2020, wants to end siren tests. Now the fuel pools are still full of radiation. Still full of fuel rods that are all splitting the atoms into the community that's surrounded by farms. And they're trying to save money to do that. They're trying to skimp on this nuclear meltdown site again. If the request is granted, 10-mile evacuation zone surrounding this nuclear disease factory that still got fuel pools full of reactor cores would cease to exist, and that off-site radiation monitoring would end. Not that they're ever going to tell you there's something there. There's zero possibility anywhere in the planet them telling you that there's radioactive fallout. It's zero. As with regular testing of sirens to warn the public of the accident. No, they're meant because the local management in the community gets $450,000 a year for emergency management because of the nuclear power plant. It's a lot of money to play with each year, right? For the volunteer search and rescue and everybody else that gets involved in this. This is a lifeline in many ways. Fuel rods, which were removed from the reactor and transferred to a cooling pool. Cooling pools, they have to replenish it every single day because it's boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. Each liter is saturated with isotopes because the fuel is still splitting the atoms. It's a scumbag industry. Every facet of it, none of it screams scumbag. With all fuel safely stored in a pool, it's not safely in the pool, for goodness sakes. It's in a fuel pool lumped together because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. It's a catastrophic event waiting to happen. And that it's hemorrhaging isotopes into the environment through the skinny stacks because it's fuel. It's still splitting the atoms. They get soaked up in the water evaporates each day. We're talking 120,000 liters a day is typical for every pool. There's 1,000 of them worldwide. And all of these places are surrounded by water and farms. You really think this is not an agenda? No need to focus on health. Or we need to focus on health, not money. So that picture in the background, you can't see it, but it's farmland. Some believe nuclear power plants are finished in this country, including nuclear power officials. And the 79 meltdown in Susquehanna River, Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island, released a large amount of radioactivity, although the exact calculations are elusive, and almost all medical journals ignored the health issue. Which is why we got a poll tonight. Was 3 Mile Island deadly radioactive fallout, dangers and damages and health issues omitted, left out by the heartless nuclear academics and professors? Why, yes it was, Dana. Almost all medical journals ignored the health issues, concluded no harm was committed, or blamed stress for any health. And nearly 12 years after the meltdown, no article with specific diseases or death rates has been published, compared with 31 articles on the health effects of 3 Mile Island-induced stress. Yeah, there was endless studies, more than that, came out blaming any health problems on fear-mongering. Cancer rates rose 64% among the residents within 10 miles, from 1,722 to 2,831 cases. And that alone should have raised red flags about exposure to toxic radioactivity. But what he's not acknowledging is there's 1,800 other health issues. There's heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. So the mental health are real. It's dementia and autism, diabetes, or dementia and schizophrenia. There's many mental health issues for the children that are born after. Thereafter, a bitter fight broke out among researchers from Columbia University, University of Pittsburgh, claimed that no harm from the meltdown, while those from the University of North Carolina concluded 64% jump was indeed a result of the toxic exposure. Yeah, it was a statistical spike from that month any other year in their recorded history of fatalities. A 2017 article from Penn State University concluded genetic mutations among those near the plant who developed thyroid cancer were linked with radiation exposure. And so they don't mind fighting about the thyroid, which, by the way, when your thyroid is saturated with radiation, it's producing radioactive hormones. And you can't, everything doesn't magnetize and go to your thyroid. If your thyroid's bad, so is every other gland and organ in your body. You can't have one without all the others. The death rates of infants under 1 month in Dauphin County, the site of the plant, and Lebanon County immediately downwind east, jumped 50% in the first 2 years after the meltdown. So infant mortality rates doubled. 3 Mile Island, Unit 1 posed a different type of hazard. It never melted, but continued to emit relatively low levels compared to a meltdown of emissions into the environment and the water, the air, and the food through human bodies, and thus human bodies, until shutdown in late September. Well, all the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation too. Nobody will ever mention it. But if you look up, that's what's wrong. That's what happens. That's what fuel pools are. They're splitting atoms. And these are physical. They can't stay in the pool. It boils off 120,000 liters a day from all the atoms that are split. So each liter is saturated with billions, if not trillions and trillions, of man-made anthropogenic atoms that are... It should be streaming. And if I'm already back, just bear with me for 1 second. I gotta get it working on my end. I'm connected. We both got the stream going. Excellent connection. Looks like I'm back. If you're watching this later, you probably never noticed nothing. We'll check the comments to see if anybody says anything. And away we go again. We should be back. Yeah, the centrifugal force is excellent. Okay. Hi, John. All right, and it says good connection on my end. I'll show you what I mean. See excellent connection right here. So we're back. Yeah, we had power outage. Power flashed off for about 15-20 seconds. It only came back on about 45 minutes before we went live, right? And so they must have been rebooting another section. It might happen again. If it happens again, I'm sorry, but if you're live, I'll be back 5, 6, 7 minutes later by the looks of things. If not, then I'll leave a comment in the comment section. So let's finish out. Do you remember where we... Well, if you're watching this later, you'll remember. So we were talking about children. So in the first 28 days, infant mortality rates, there was an extra 136 excess children died, infants, the first 28 days. That's a plume. That's a real plume. Folks, that's evidence, incontestable, unassailable evidence of a massive radioactive plume. It's not radioactive steam, it's a radioactive lethal plume that killed over 136 children in the first 28 days. And so, which means everybody, every child, every infant, every human that was there got a significant dose that would have resulted in one of 1,800 diseases over their lifetime for sure. These were huge doses. This is why you see there was also a pet mortality event too, right? Because people left their pets behind. And remember, a lot of people left their windows open and their doors open. Remember those days when you could leave your windows and your doors open? You didn't have to worry about some crackhead coming by. Well, that was those days, and so that was normal. So people's houses were brutally radioactive that they came back to. So if you're not going to include heart problems and liver and lung and respiratories and pituitary and thyroid, and kidney and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia, autism and diabetes and Down syndrome. So autism and Down syndrome, dementia and autism and schizophrenia, what are you seeing right now? You're seeing an explosion in it, right? I got my hair cut yesterday, in fact, and the hairdresser was talking about this bizarre explosion of people with dementia and autism in the community. And I was like, really? What's going on? What do you think is going on? She said, I don't know, but I'm telling you something. I've never seen nothing like this. And she said, in clusters of people dying that I've never seen or heard. And Dad says the same thing. She said that never heard of it in their lives. Yeah, well, Canada was the only country that didn't ban food from Japan. 55 countries banned it in 14 prefectures. You got any idea how late this is, 12 years later, how deep down the hole we actually are? And so Canada had removed all restrictions, not that they had any, but officially declared no restrictions after 93 days. And so Japan couldn't ship it anywhere into Canada. They weren't going to stop growing it. And you wonder why everybody in Canada is getting sick. Nuclear plant leak plugged, which is you can't plug a nuclear meltdown. Cut your throat, media. Previous study shows that when reactors close, there's an immediate reduction in local infant deaths, infant mortality, and cancer cases in young children. And over time, there's a reduction in cancer rates of all ages. Let me read that again. Previous studies shows that when reactors close, there's an immediate reduction in infant mortality rates and cancer cases in children, that over time there are reductions in cancer rates of all ages. There's 136 excess children died after 3 Mile Island in the first 28 days. So what do you really think is going on? What could it be? There was nothing else thrown into the equation. Well, here's my opinion of Raphael Grossi, the head of the the so-called nuclear agency, this corporation known as UN. Nothing but contempt for these people. And I mean contempt. And I have a lot of it. Previous study shows that when reactors close, there's immediate reduction in infant mortality and cancer cases in children. Make you all warm inside? The recent shutdown should improve public health in the area around 3 Mile Island. No, it's radioactive wasteland now. And should serve as a reminder that the future energy policies rely on truly clean sources. Well, there is no clean sources, but everything's clean compared to nuclear. Nuclear is disgusting. And not harmful ones like disgusting nuclear. He forgot to put the word disgusting in there, so I put it in there for him. Women of 3 Mile Island, Idaho, and the front lines in a nuclear meltdown. Hi, everybody. Let's double check in. Let's do a little check-in on our poll here. Was 3 Mile Island deadly radioactive fallout effects omitted by heartless, despicable nuclear academics and professors? Duh. Of course it was, David. So, you can't actually trust anybody in the nuclear industry. Like these types of people that we're talking about. In any story, you do not want to trust them or their descendants or their family. A documentary explores the lives of women affected by the 3 Mile Island and the waste from which eventually ended up in Idaho. Yeah, they moved quite a bit. There's a lot of waste they actually moved to Idaho, which is a great big nuclear 850 square mile nuclear wasteland, Idaho National Laboratories. I don't know what it is about, because I covered it so much over all these years. But whenever I talk about Idaho National Laboratory, which is on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country, by the way, right alongside a major water that feeds 25,000 agricultural farms, and they dumped up just 45-gallon drums of cesium all over the river. And they're on top of the biggest aquifer that feeds cities and farms too. They built it on purpose in that spot. They did. In the 50s, they spent over $100 million just on trying to clean up the waste that got deep underground and then into the aquifers. It was running into the aquifers. They can't come close to it. You can never clean up the aquifers. It's infested the entire planet now, but particularly places like this is insidious how far this is spread through the groundwaters. So the melted cores are stored at the Idaho National Disaster Factory, Idaho National Laboratories. We don't really have a safe long-term mean of storage. No, that's why all the fuel pools are stuffed. And this idea that we can take it somewhere else, there is no somewhere else. We live on a small planet. Thank you. Well said. Way to go. Kerry Cookie is the former executive director of the Snake River Alliance who quoted that. A nuclear watchdog group that formed in the immediate wake of the disaster of 3 Mile Island. She said the group was and still is concerned about the waste stored at the Idaho National Laboratory. And I've covered these people quite a bit over the years. And they're pretty honest, being what I'm quoted them so far. She says the group was still is concerned about the waste stored in Idaho National Laboratories and its threat to the Snake River aquifer. Well, it's already polluted it. They build them on the aquifers in case they have a meltdown because they do all the experimental reactors. And they've had meltdowns at Idaho National Laboratories. There's about 300,000 Idahoans and much of the region's agricultural. Right, and it's polluted. So I withdraw the comment I made earlier about that. Surge in coal pollution led to smaller newborns. Let's try that again here. Surge. After the 3 Mile Island accident, the weight of newborns fell by 5.4%. Not because you what you're trying to say, to frame in a narrative as if it didn't have a meltdown, instead they shut down the nuclear plant. This is what they're trying to frame it as. Led to smaller newborns. That was the study. A scientist, a scumbag, on Monday said he switched to coal-fired power in the U.S. state after the nuclear accident, which was a meltdown, not an accident. This is a meltdown. There's a big difference. In 1979, led to a sharp fall in birth rates. There's a sharp fall in birth rates because of radiation poisoning. There's coal plants all over the world. We don't see children being born tiny everywhere there's coal plants. Or anywhere. Right? So they're trying to, because they had to open coal plants, this scum degenerate pro-nuclear monster came out with that study. What a friggin' monster to write something like that. And that's how they make a living. Their whole life they'll do stuff like this. The study looked at the aftermath of 3 Mile Island, which caused 2 nuclear plants to be shut down, the power to be replaced locally by coal. No, they melted down. You couldn't start it back up. After the energy switch, it wasn't a switch, it was a necessity. The weight of the newborns fell by 5.4% in the counties. And that had the highest level of air pollution from coal particles. Well, they blow every direction. It doesn't just blow in one direction. And coal doesn't blow that far. 30, 40, 50 miles in heavy winds. They're massive particles compared to anthropogenic man-made radiation, which is atoms, physical atoms. The coal particles are thousands of times bigger, and it's nature. It assimilates right back into the earth. It's created by the sun, these elements. The man-made stuff is not created by the sun. That's why we call it man-made. Coal is not the killer. How can coal be a killer when, it takes 20, 30 years for coal to harm people in those communities that live right next to the coal? And all you got to do is move a couple of miles away and they're okay. It's like anything. If you stay breathing in heavy polluted air, but you can't, we got to heat our water, we got to heat our homes and everything else. Industry and businesses, and that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. And so there's going to be some pollution, but the pollution that's from the normal elements on the planet, we're acclimated to that stuff through genetic superior selection. All the species are, all the biota, all the bacteria, all the fungus, everything is already acclimated to it. But man-made anthropogenic radiation, right? So the low birth rates is the same as the infant mortality over the next 28 days, where there's 136 of them died, children. Because a big plume went through, see? Because that's what it took to kill those children in that other study. And to suggest that coal is the reason they're all got the birth rates, well, you have to back that up by showing coal plants somewhere else on the planet with those exact same attributes. And you can't, otherwise you would have, see? So dishonest. That's the worst thing about it. It shows us And to produce these studies to manipulate you so you stay in harm's way. My goodness, some people's children. 3 Mile Island, exaggerated risk of nuclear power. Exaggerated risk of nuclear power. Well, I never. Exaggerated risk. Like, say, all the universities and major government agencies put out studies like this of Fukushima fallout, where my finger is pointed is just 19.5 days covering the whole planet. This is a real concern because it's only based on venting. It's not based on the actual multiple reactors and at least 8 fuel pools that were stuffed with reactor cores because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. So to be a journalist, your job is to be a scumbag and a degenerate and a monster. To write a couple of paragraphs, and that's how you pay all your bills and mortgages and car payments and put your children through college and you party and go to restaurants all the time because you wrote a couple of paragraphs. No, because you sold everybody out. You stabbed everything, including your own loved ones, in the back. That's what a journalist is. 3 Mile Island caused no physical harms, which is completely... And look at all the farms in the background. That's all it does is cause harms. And then that water runs down through all the communities, radioactive water. He said the answer is no one died. No one was injured. And I already showed you, obviously, that that's simply not true. And according to the non-regulatory rubber-stamped agency, the 2 million people in the area around 3 Mile Island 2 at the time of the accident received the estimated dose of a milligram above the usual background dose of radiation. A milligram around... So you can't equate the natural anthropogenic emitters or the natural stuff with the anthropogenic man-made, because that's what they're doing there. It's a minuscule amount of radiation compared to what we all encounter in the normal course of everyday life. Well, man-made radiation is not milligrams. It's Becquerels, atomic decays. It's physical atoms that are pulsing energy every second, and that can be breathed in, can be absorbed in water and food. You can't... Like, a milligram is not a physical atom floating around. That's something more appropriate to being close to a nuclear dump or a nuclear site or a nuclear reactor building. You wouldn't, and you have to be quite a far away to get that small of a dose. A minuscule amount of radiation compared to what we encounter in a normal course, they're completely different radiation. There is no normal. And there is not just cancer, there's 1,800 diseases. The greatest effects were on the future permitting and construction of reactors and the non-regulatory commission's rules and procedures. Sounds like Rod Adams, don't it? More than 100 plant cancellations following the 3 Mile Island accident. Just when I thought nothing could cheer me up, I forgot about that one. Let that sit there for a second. And drink my cold tea. Whoa, let's keep it rolling. So 100 nuclear power plants got cancelled because of 3 Mile Island. Because it was like a banana and a potato chip, walking in the sunshine and climbing a mountain, right? No, because there was 138 children, 36 children died in the first 28 days, and they knew it. It was a lot more than that. And cancer is not the only thing. Infant mortality is not the only thing. If there's infant mortality on that kind of a rate, and there was, everybody's gotten sick. The Nuclear Energy Institute was also established to be an internally policing mechanism. The Nuclear Energy Institute, who I've covered at least 1,000 times, these are nothing but degenerate scum, for goodness sakes. These are incredible scumbags, for goodness sakes. They were created as the watch group. As control opposition, you mean? We might be more afraid of a nuclear disaster or a lightning strike than we are of a car crash or a heart attack. It's been quite a while since I heard that one. even though we're far more likely to be done by the latter rather than the former. No, radiation fallout causes heart attacks. And we're talking huge numbers, by the way. Such a scumbag industry, isn't it? Although there have been only 3 major commercial nuclear accidents, the key word here is commercial, by the way. 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima. Oh, what about Hanford? How many meltdowns do you have there? How about Santa Susana, which is equal to 460 3 Mile Islands of radioactive fallout? How about the Idaho National Laboratory? There's enough. One thing about the nuclear industry, there's enough scumbags to go around for sure. They'll never run out of it. And only one of those was in the United States. Yeah, 3 Mile Island. Santa Susana was equal to 460 of them, which means it's equal to about 1,200 of them. And Paige Lambermont is a Policy Associate Institute for Energy Research. In other words, a degenerate scumbag who will sell out anybody for a paycheck. Write a couple of paragraphs, pay all your mortgages. You really think that they're getting all that money to write a couple of paragraphs? They're getting all that money to sell you out, to stab you in the face with a pencil. So even though no one died or was even harmed in the 3 Mile Island, except for all the children and all the adults and all the pets and every generation following it, she's a despicable, degenerate scum from America University, and she's from Butler, Pennsylvania. So she sold out all of her friends and family too. What a great big C she turned out to be. 3 Mile Island, an exaggerated risk. 3 Mile Island caused no physical harm. That's the same one. 3 Mile Island radiation monitoring to continue as Exxon pools planning dollars. So they hold these communities hostages. They contributed to the local government in 2018 was $425,000 to the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. $87,000 to that little community itself they're situated in, which is absurd, by the way. You know, to put the disease factor right in the community, and surrounded by farms on top of that and fresh water, and $5,000 to the Londonderry Township, where the facility is located, rather. Massive tax cuts sought for 3 Mile Island. Said the nuclear disease factory isn't worth a dime. Yeah, of course it's not. But you still have responsibilities, scumbags. But guess what? This is why it's so hard to close a plant down, is because the community is addicted to this free money. The entire community is funded by this free money. The Illinois-based Exxon took the case to court after the Country Assessment Appeals Board refused to change the $18 million market value attached to the property since 2007. The firm claimed 3 Mile Island had no market value since the decommissioning because it's idle, essentially unusable, and would be undergoing radioactive decontamination for till 2079, I think it is. That will cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, but that money was supposed to be put away from the ratepayers, right? If the court agrees with Exxon that 3 Mile Island is now worth at most zero, the biggest loser financially would be the Lower Dolphin School District, which gets $336,000 each year. The county would forfeit $125,000 each year. The town would lose $91,000, and the library would lose $6,000. So the community is in Stockholm Syndrome now, and it's addicted. It can't survive without it. And so they'll cut your throat to keep that open for another 20 years, like Monticello's doing right now, right? They'll cut your throat. If they can get at you, they'll hunt you down and kill you right on the spot. They're completely void of any rationale. Three Mile Island cleanup needs to be fully funded. Think about that statement. Don't let it hurt you, though. Your brains. The removal of damaged fuel and disposal of 2.3 million gallons of accident-generated water. Accident-generated water. What an interesting way to frame it. Accident-generated water. So this is Lethal by the Leader. One constant theme that emerged from all sides was the desire to make sure that adequate funding was in place to fund the 3 Mile. So here you got a nuclear meltdown that they hid away, and they don't even have the money to clean it up because they stole that too. It's a ruthless industry, I'll give you that. We cover so much of this, it shocks me. Still. Funding the 3 Mile Island cleanup has been problematic dating back to the accident in 1979. At that time, there was no decommissioning funds set aside. They never had a nickel put aside. In 1982, the Governor Richard Thornburgh, Dick the Monster, cobbled together the Thornburgh Plan, who refused to evacuate the children and the victims till 3 days too late. So he cobbled together what's known as the Thornburgh Plan, a $1 billion fund to pay for the removal of this non-melted down reactor, right? Because they're claiming it's not melted down, but they needed $1 billion to take the fuel out. $1 billion is a lot of money. You can get a lot of homeless people with that kind of money. In 1988, after 10 years after the accident, the non-regulatory committee, which was created in response to the meltdown, just as Japan's regulatory agency was created after Fukushima, began requiring owners to certify that sufficient money would be available when needed to decommission their disease factories. 20 years later, on March 26, 2018, the non-regulatory committee estimated the decommissioning price tag for 3 Mile Island would be $1.3 billion. But I thought it was just a tiny little meltdown, you lying scum. However, the cost for the cleanup, based on First Energy's estimate, is $1.4 billion. Just keeps going up. And doesn't cover radioactive waste removal. What the hell does it cover? Like, we're talking about a single building. You got to take some fuel at a reactor. $1.4 billion is not even going to cut it. That's not even going to get rid of the waste removal. This is a massive meltdown. It's approximately $900 million in the cleanup fund, which is $500 million less than needed to get the job done, which turned out to be over $2 billion. Was it $2.6 billion or something? Because that's an older story. We will endure the difficulties, the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island. We covered that already, right? The governor said we assure the Pennsylvanians are tough people made of sterner stuff, and we will endure, like, the difficulties. The thing you got to endure is you go and you breathe in a whole bunch of radiation, and 10, 20, 30 years down the road you liquidate all your assets. Or worse, you have children and then you have to liquidate all your assets to try to get them up to the age of teenage land before they finally die from going to the hospital and getting irradiated. You're not dysfunctional, it's just stupid. The qualification for work in nuclear industry is you got to be incredibly stupid. The rest comes with it. The incident at 3 Mile Island, according to the Non-Regulatory Commission, was the most serious accident in the U.S. Again, that word commercial. And by that they avoid talking about Santa Susana. Oh, well, Santa Susana's not commercial, Dana. It's 460 times more radioactive fallout than 3 Mile Island. How is that not important? And one of their stories coming up is they admit to 2 million people getting radioactive doses. Wait till it gets to that. I got something in my eye. I think it's my knuckle. I have to watch the video after to find out. Commercial nuclear power plant operating history. Those smaller releases had no detectable health effects on the plant workers or the 136 dead children in the next 28 days. I really hate when I read this. If I was, in a trial and I was one in the jury, I wouldn't be very impressed with the people that was writing that. I'd be asking, is the death penalty on the table? Because I knows what they deserve. Although it's small releases from the multiple fuel assemblies melting down and obviously exiting the containment. How did they ever get out of the containment? How could you get a plume out of the building? Well, it melted down, Dana. How did 136 children die in the next 28 days, scumbags? Very small off-site releases of radioactivity. Anybody who says stuff like that should have their lips cut off. Legally. With a plutonium suppository at the same time. Scranton says the utility is... Well, I'm a nuclear proctologist. What do you expect? Scranton says the utility has ended venting contaminated steam into the air. They lost complete control. They weren't venting anything. It was hemorrhaging out. This is not steam, by the way. Contaminated steam. This was 4:30 in the afternoon. Oh, this gets good. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the plant again vents radioactive steam. Oops, thought you said you weren't going to vent no more. That's Thornburgh over there, by the way. And that's shit for brains from Exxon. From MedEd, rather. At 10 a.m., MedEd holds a press conference at the Hershey Convention Center, which is right here. Dick Thornburgh and MedEd himself. Walter M. Kreitz says the cool down is occurring at a more rapid rate, and that the radiation leaked from the plant has been in the low 5 to 7 millirems per hour. 5 to 7 millirems per hour. But Sternglass, if you've never heard of Sternglass, you should look him up. He was one of the rare ones out there, actually, was Sternglass. And years ago we used to bring him up quite often, but over the years you kind of use him so much you forget about it. And he put out a lot of good information. Calls for the plant to be shut down, and Wald said any radiation can cause harm. So he died when he was 91 years old, 2015. He was the first scientist to put a number on the U.S. deaths with airborne radioactive fallout, which we call a nuclear war, because the nuclear weapons are the same weapons that were used in a nuclear war. The radioactive fallout was the same. He reported U.S. infant mortality spiked, plunged steadily throughout the 20th century, was essentially unchanged in the 50s and 60s. It was roughly 375,000 extra infant mortalities. The cause, Dr. Ernest Sternglass, a physicist, the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine professor, theorized that the stagnation in infants' deaths progress was the result of the atomic bomb test fallout. So whoever worded that didn't do the best. That was, what's his name? I've covered many times over the years. Didn't do the best of jobs by framing that, but he was able to show in his studies an extra 375,000 infants. Now, when you compare that at 3 Mile Island in the first 28 days, it was 136 extra infant mortality spike, an abnormality, an event. He became the first scientist to put a number on the U.S. nuclear casualties. Of course, there's 1,800 diseases, not just cancer, not just infant mortality. But we've seen spikes in British Columbia and in the United States after Fukushima of infant mortalities also. The battle was atomic era health hazards had begun. Well, cancer rates epidemic started in the 70s, right? A couple of decades after endless nuclear testing. And in the middle of it, basically, right? France was still going until 96 with open air testing. A scumbag. And everything that was tested in the ground vented at high speed out of the ground. Like, the fastest object on the planet was a manhole cover from a nuclear test. Sent a 50, 60-pound manhole cover into outer space. It's apparently still traveling towards outer space. It left here at around 200,000 miles per hour. Left the planet. So imagine the Earth splitting, venting, right, which is splitting the Earth from the detonation, and those plumes are coming out at 200,000 miles per hour. So it's easy to jack it up into the troposphere, and it's easy then, right, for the jet streams to lug it around the planet in just a couple of weeks, right? He's got a lot of good material, Sternglass did. We will endure the difficulties, the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island, 1979. That's where we jump right there, back to that story. At 11 p.m., if I remember correctly, the NRC official in Washington said damage to the fuel rods is more serious than originally thought, indicated it would be a long time for the cleanup finishes, which was 14 years. Anybody know what car that is? I know what it is, I just can't remember. Is that a Plymouth? I can't remember. She's a big beast anyway, whatever she is. I wouldn't mind having one. Between 7:15 and 8:15 a.m., an uncontrollable burst of radioactive gas is vented. Well, what caused the burst? From the containment building into the auxiliary building, and a plane carrying detection equipment measured radiation levels between 300 and 1200 millirem, which is equal to 12. A millirem is 100. It's 100 millirems for a millisievert, right? I think. Yeah. So that's 12 millisieverts, which is 12,000 microsieverts per hour. Now, but that's not how you measure radiation. You measure in atomic decays. So that's 12,000 microsieverts. And so each microsievert considered about 150 atomic decays a second. And that actually, because you're only measuring gamma, I'll bring it up on the screen for you. If my computer decides it wants to, my external computer decides it wants to play ball. So let's bring that up for the hell of it. So that's 12,000 microsieverts. And we're going to downplay it by only saying it's 150 becquerels, atomic decays a second. So that's 1.8 million. That's about right. 1.8 million atomic decays a second. Right? So they were probably 1,000 feet up or something. And that sounds right. 300 to 1,200 millirem of just gamma. So you got to multiply that by about 600 to get the real number. Because you got to include all the fission products and daughters and all this other stuff. You know, all the stuff that nobody says matters. And millirems, there's 100 millirems for each millisievert. At 9 p.m., York County Civil Defense Director Leslie Jackson put Phase 1 of the nuclear disaster plan for the county in operation to stop the panic caused by unconfirmed reports of evacuations, which they should have evacuated. Thornburgh didn't want to evacuate him because he didn't want to panic. Not he didn't. He was brand new. He knew nothing about nuclear. The nuclear industry told him what to say, right? At 9:30 p.m., E.C. McCabe, NRC official, confirmed the releases of the radioactivity reporters outside the NRC trailer at the 3 Mile, and they all ran to the nuclear meltdown. Don't run the nuclear meltdowns. Run the other way. My God, what are we going to do with you people? Remember the pictures at the beginning where everybody gathers up at the nuclear plant? What? There's a nuclear meltdown. I should go there. They said it's like a banana. I like bananas. The Associated Press moved an urgent story saying the governor is considering evacuation of 4 counties. Well, it should have been more than that. If you're hitting 1.8 million counts per minute from an airplane, brother, we're talking huge numbers. Because they're only going to acknowledge gamma. They're not looking for alphas and betas and neutrons. And you can't have that without having the X-rays. Because they don't mingle, right? There's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, these physical atoms. So just like a snowstorm, but you can't see it. And it never goes away. It's there forever. Thornburgh's press secretary, Paul Crotchlow, indicates there is no need to evacuate, but says the governor has warned people within 10 miles of the disease factory to stay indoors and close their windows. Never listen to the government, man. Just get out of there. You're going to get burnt if you stay there. Which way's the wind blowing? Get that on your ass and get out of there. I can't believe you've done that. Let's take a break and check the poll. That kind of shocks the shit out of me. Was 3 Mile Island deadly radioactive fallout effects omitted by the degenerate, heartless nuclear academics and professors? Duh, Dana, of course it was. Dana. So, it's a total different story, right, than what they told us. So they told people within 10-mile radius of where, after this, there was the new law was you had to put sirens within 10 miles of a nuclear power plant in every direction. Which means you got between 90 to 160 sirens, big freaking stupid sirens. And so every pet and every child in that zone is going to be terrorized several times a year. Every animal, every bird is going to be terrorized by these sirens. Within a 10-mile radius of the plant to stay indoors, get sick, and fucking die. At 11 p.m., a second release of radioactive gases occurs. Well, like, they're not venting it. This is continuous. And Spider-Man, and you might know him as Jimmy Carter, after Chalk River, he turned into Spider-Man, right? Peter Pan? Or Peter something? Jimmy Carter, the president, telephoned Thornburgh and offered his assistance. We're here for you, Dick. A siren goes off in downtown Harrisburg, causing some panic. Thank God. Not really, though, because panic to them apparently is run to the nuke plant. Hey, I'm not making this shit up. That's what they done. You know what I'm saying is true. Yeah, we got a nuclear meltdown. Well, let's get the fuck down to the nuke plant and have a look. I never seen a meltdown before. Look, buddy, in the bottom right-hand corner with a kid on his back. He should be found and arrested for child abuse, taking a child to a nuclear meltdown. Look at him, man. Never disappoint me. That's the rule of these guys. Don't disappoint. I can't see nothing. George, can you see the meltdown? No, Tommy, get your kid on his shoulder. Maybe he can see it. Say, one of you guys should have got up on that bus. You might have seen it. Well, Buddy got up there on something. The guy with the checkered shirt on. Oh, he's with the media. Even the media didn't have the common sense not to go there. Well, look at the victims. Yeah, it was 3 Mile Island. Look at all the kids, man. Ridiculous, isn't it? As I was waltzing with my darling through the Tennessee gardens, an old friend I happened to see. Yeah, so that's all of these people are zombies. They ran to the nuclear meltdown. I can't possibly describe how bizarre that picture is. But for goodness sakes, don't do that if there's a nuclear meltdown near you. Thornburgh, mass murderer, issued his advisory for pregnant women, preschool-aged children, to evacuate from a 5-mile radius, and he ordered 23 schools in the area to close. Nothing shocks me anymore. And they stuck the victims. Well, you can't go too far. Go to the school here. You'll be okay. We got cardboard boxes for you to hide behind. 3 West Shore School District schools began evacuations. Oh, so that's the afternoon we're talking about. Thornburgh says that the indoor restrictions will be lifted at midnight for residents within 10-mile radius of the disease factory. Well, once a plume, always a plume. Now you're supposed to leave. Like telling people to stay indoors, close your windows, don't breathe. Like, how do you not poison the water supply and the taps and the faucets and everything else? These are well-disciplined victims, is what you're talking about here. Saturday, March the 31st, 4 p.m., evacuations of residents of Frey Village in Middletown takes place, an independent decision of the home operators. It's an old age home, I think. Officials at the Oddfellow home in Pennsylvania made a similar decision later. Bless their hearts. Denton briefs reporters on the bubble, which turned out to be a nuclear meltdown, and warned the next few days are critical in reducing the danger, which was long too late. It raised the possibility of mass evacuation if the bubble is removed by increasing coolant pressure or blasting it out with high-pressure steam. In other words, they were going to do everything they can so you couldn't work out what was happening. Look at Thornburgh hiding behind Jimmy with the dark suit on. Bless your hearts. Community group created to avoid 3 Mile Island cleanup. Nuke planners, state historians, school districts that are dependent upon the money. You know, the local government officials are dependent upon money from the industry. The nuclear planners. These are not advisory. That's seated as it gets. Hey, don't be like the Pennsylvania victims and go to the nuclear meltdown. Just say no to going to nuclear meltdown. Nuclear meltdown, bad. On the 10th anniversary of 3 Mile Island anniversary in March '89, Paul Holoka of Xeon View displayed 2 deers whose antlers he believed were disfigured as a result of the nuclear accident. I guarantee you that's what it is. I survived 3 Mile Island. When you can't quantify that assertion because it could take a decade or two for the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries to manifest or get diagnosed. This is one of my favorite stories. We've got a few of them tonight, haven't we? Testing of evaporators began at 3 Mile Island, boiling off 2.3 million gallons of water contaminated, not radioactive water, but water contaminated in the nation's worst commercial nuke. Again, the word commercial, eh? So that way they don't have to say, well, because Santa Susana was equal to 463 Mile Islands of radioactive fallout. That don't mean 3 Mile Island doesn't matter. I can assure you this matters, and this is why we're covering this. Small amounts of one radioactive element, tritium. Go figure. What, really? No, they wouldn't do that way back then, would they? Will be gradually released into the air in the form of steam for 18 to 24 months period. Can you imagine what kind of low-life people in this industry actually are? It was Arnie Gunnarsson and Lake Barrett, by the way, that ran the decommissioning. The scum of the scum, right? Why not? And they're both still active scumbags on top of that. So claiming that there's only tritium, way back then, every accident they say the word tritium only, right? Contains about 18 drops worth of tritium bonded water in 2.3 million gallons is 18 little drops. It's going to take them 2 years to boil off 18 drops. Can you believe the balls of these people? It gets worse. They said the released effect on the average person within 50 miles of 3 Mile Island will be less than the amount of radiation received from a year of watching color television. Like I covered a story earlier where they admitted 2 million people got radioactivity, but it was like a millisievert. But you don't get millisieverts from radioactive fallout. You get Beckles, you get physical atoms, and each one wrecks your immune system, and also triggers your immune system attack it relentlessly for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And every white blood cell has to displace a red blood cell, which carries oxygen nutrition on top of that. So the more you got, the infinitely worse it is. But to suggest that it was the equal to watching, and a color television back then were pretty nasty, right? But you can turn the TV on and off. This is different radiation. This is in your body. It's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. So it's wrecking all your organs. It's wrecking your chromosomes. It's wrecking your DNA. And every pulse is destroying all of these cells and everything else. Your body has to attack each and everything that was destroyed every second. It's like a little bullet going off in your body every single second, or animals or birds or insects. Every second, pulsing energy at the speed of light. And as you bioaccumulate a lot of it, you have all these places all over your body that has to be attacked by white blood cells for the rest of your life. And it stays there permanently in many places in your body. For children and small creatures and insects and birds and animals and mammals and stuff like that, it gets in their bones, mutates their stem cells. Hang on, I'm playing around and frigged it up. That's to hold my cord from my headphones in place. So 50-mile radius, 50 miles. Remember that word, right? 50 miles. Remember before they were talking about shelter in place for 10 miles? Now the numbers is 50 miles out. You get what's going on? Will be less than the amount of radiation from watching color television for a year. So anybody who says something like that should be drowned in the fuel pool immediately. Better don't drown them. Waterboard them a couple of thousand times. And find out who they're partnered up with, and then convict them and get them in jail so they can't do it again. But Bedell said concern for public sensitivity has mandated the intensive $4 million effort to rid the water of contamination. They have $1.4 billion to get the fuel out of the reactor. How much did they have for the rest of the stuff? $4 million effort to rid the water of contamination. They claim was 18 drops in 2.3 million gallons. Like, the contempt is unbelievable. The incredible lies is it's unbelievable that this could happen and continues to happen. It's inconceivable that they're that vicious. They would say it's like TV, or that it's like a Miller rim, or that it was harmless and innocuous or benign. Most of the radioactive material in the water, including tons of boron. We're not going to put tons of boron in the water for 18 drops of tritium, for starters. The boron is to try to stop a chain reaction. That's what the borons are for. So every time the water was poured over the reactor fuel, you can't suck it all up. So where did the rest go? Straight into the Susquehanna River. Will be separated through a filtration demineralization system. That's not how it works. You can't. You're talking about huge numbers of curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. And so you can never get near the filtration system. It becomes thousands of sieverts right away. Right, that's the real story. But what they're selling you there is 5 buckets of horse shit with no lids. The boron will be collected, shipped off site as low-level waste. Again, these are despicable people, whoever wrote that and whoever orchestrated that. These are despicable subhuman species that would do something like that. Oh yeah, right, Doug Beddoll. A spokesperson for GPU Nuclear Corporation. Who owned it at the time, right? 3 Mile owner looks to move to next phase of cleanup. Is applying to change their license to stage decommissioning the plant by disposing of the radioactive material at a commercial site or decontaminating material on site. 2022, folks. This is the infamous and I got to use the word partial. Meltdown is a meltdown, period. It doesn't matter if it's partial or a whole. It's a meltdown. It's brutal. The most serious accident at every time I see it, it makes me sick to my guts, a commercial nuclear power plant in U.S. history, which we know is not true. If you leave out the word commercial, and if you actually look at meltdowns, you got to look at Los Alamos National Laboratory, you got to look at Hanford, you got to look at all the other national laboratories. They're using the decon method. The method involves disposing of radioactive material at a commercial site or decontamination material on site. Well, why did you have to change it all this time later? The non-regulatory agency's preliminary review finds no increased risk of accidents at the site by moving to the next phase of the cleanup. 3 Mile Island's 2 solutions brought the reactor in 2020. So then you want to make money, got to make a profit. So the misery machine never stops, does it? Betting you could profit by cleaning up the plant on a lower budget at a nuclear meltdown than what his dedicated fund was. Well, there wasn't that much money. They barely were able to get it. They had to cobble up $1 billion, right? Because the nuclear industry don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about anybody or any species. They don't even want to clean up the mess. They should have thrown $10 billion at it. It's a friggin' nuclear meltdown, for goodness sakes. Man killed while working at 3 Mile Island, but they got to protect their reputation. So it wasn't in a radiological control area, so it doesn't really matter. There's no way that nuclear waste is going to run down in that river. Agency could keep 3 Mile Island debris in the Idaho National Laboratories. The core from Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island, and partially scum melted in '79, an event that changed the way the American viewed nuclear technology. The worst nuclear accident in U.S. history. Oh yeah, besides Santa Susana in 1959, which 459 times the amount of the radiation released from 3 Mile Island. Let's conveniently forget about that and pretend 3 Mile Island is the worst one. So they brought it to the Idaho 2,300 square kilometer nuclear wasteland. And now they've been sending non-stop radioactive legacy waste from the Manhattan Project to the Waste Isolation Pilot Project. They changed the name to a plant. But this was just supposed to be an experiment. And as soon as they opened it up, Idaho National Laboratory said, well, we don't care. We're just going to keep shipping. In fact, this year they're going to double it. In 2018, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill making it easier for Hanford workers to assess workers' compensation. Let me go back for you, because this is important. Here's how bad Hanford actually is. The Federal Appeal Panel says the state can protect the Hanford workers because they had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And the ruling was to get qualified for ease compensation rules. Workers only need to work at the Hanford site for a single 8-hour shift. So you just needed one exposure, 1 day's work at Hanford, and you can get a pension for the rest of your life. Retroactively, if you worked there 50 years ago, now you're officially entitled to a pension. You don't have to prove you got sick there. You just got to work there once. Do you really think the nuclear meltdown in Pennsylvania is any different to the victims that were thrown at that? Because they were. That's what was thrown there. There was no nuclear scientists working on it. Hanford, by the way, the big, expensive environmental dilemma plague in the Northwest. I just want you to appreciate it's 586 square miles. A nuclear wasteland. And while we're here, I redone the math. So 177 storage tanks was 56 million gallons. Okay. But they dumped 450 billion gallons into the soil, right? So you like this because I redone the math. Guess what I discovered? I made a mistake in my math. So during the first 20 years of Hanford nuclear production, dumped 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquid into the soil. So 450 billion gallons, you divide the tanks, 177 tanks, you take 56 million divided by 177. I'll get there. 56 million divided by 177 is 316,000 gallons a tank. Okay. So 450 billion divided by 360,000 is 1.4 million tanks that they dumped into the ground at Hanford in just one go. 1.4 million of those tanks that they're spending billions on. And all the talk about Hanford is they got 56 tanks, or 177 tanks with 56 million gallons. But because they dumped 450 billion gallons in the 50s and 60s, that's just one of the many incidences, by the way, is equal to 1.4 million tanks that they dumped into the soil, into the Columbian River. And if you take the 8 billion people on the planet and divide it into the 450 billion gallons, that's 56 gallons. Now, about a liter, this is lethal. 1 gallon of this, you walk past it, it'll kill you. I put an article up at the website about that for everybody today at the nuclearproctologist.org to break that down for anybody that's looking for that document. Back to 3 Mile Island. So they sent the reactor core to Idaho National Laboratories, where it's 890 square miles, and it's going to be just as contaminated as Hanford, where they brought that to. Right? I want you to have some other context besides the propaganda they feed you all the time. The previous license expired in March, said the maximum amount of 3 Mile Island debris that could be stored at the Idaho Nuclear Waste Facility Nuclear Disease Factory was 183,000 pounds of damaged nuclear fuel assemblies. Oh, I thought it was a couple of pounds. I thought it was just venting. Like, we're talking about a real meltdown. Of the damaged nuclear fuel assemblies and 300,000 pounds of material removed from the reactor vessel. What are you talking about? Because the reactor vessel melted down too. The reactor went through the vessel. So the vessel was bombarded by neutron bombardment, gamma shines, X-rays, and beta rays all the time anyway, right? But it's melted down. It's different. It's curium, see? Which killed all the dogs in all the studies. But that's a revelation right there. And so tonight you got some major stuff tonight. There's a great night of... we've still got a ways to go yet. That's great night so far of news they've never told you. Photo 3 Mile Island, look back. Let's go through some photos. We got a bunch of studies we're going to jump into. I despise these people because they hurt so many millions. At least 2 million people got brutal doses. This is a whole body counter. Look at that. Lead line. Everything's lead line, right? And then the top goes over you. And then it counts the radiation. This is supposed to be the transparency. Of course, they're never going to use that. And allegedly, you don't go into a nuclear meltdown. That's how you get a lethal dose right away. Why are they wearing booties in the room for? Because they're worried about radioactive fallout. It's madness. Every facet of the story is just... Sorry, we already showed you that. Every facet of the story just leaves you banging your head because you realize how much they lied to you. Incident? No, it was a meltdown. Why not? Why not? Why be so deceptive and deceitful and dishonest for it? Return of the Idaho test reactor, rear wind for U.S. nuclear energy. Return of Idaho test reactor. Some nuclear plants have closed in recent years. Illinois, New York, New Jersey approved subsidies in the past 2 years to bail out the commercial nuclear disease factories. Officials in some areas are considering carbon taxes on coal and natural gas to boost nuclear power. The 890 square mile energy department site, Idaho National Laboratories, that holds the test reactor 50 miles west of Idaho Falls. The core from Pennsylvania at 3 Mile Island nuclear plant was buried there after it underwent a partial meltdown in '79, one of the nation's worst nuclear accidents. So it's 200,000 pounds of reactor core and 300,000 pounds of the reactor because it melted through it, see? That's the only reason they would have framed it that way that they did. Neutron dosimetry in the 3 Mile Island Unit 2 reactor cavity with solid state track recorders. I'm going to have to go to the big screen again. A conservative lower bound estimate from the SSTR data implies at least 2 tons of radioactive fuel, just 4 assemblies lined at the bottom of the vessel. 2 tons, which is, so then why are we talking about 200,000 pounds of reactor core and 300,000 pounds of reactor vessels shipped to Idaho National Laboratory site? So this is studies. You got to be so careful. But the existence of significant neutron streaming also explains the high count rate observed with the source range monitors located in the cavity. Well, no, that they will die right away. There's no way they're going to work there. Nothing electric can work in that environment. So like the studies are meant to manipulate you. During the 2-week period of the accident, 150,000 residents were evacuated. No, they voluntarily ran away. There was no reasons for safety and health. Dick Thornburgh refused to evacuate them. During the 2-week period of the accident, 150,000 residents were evacuated. So this is the industry trying to do public relation damage. There were some increases in consumption of alcohol, cigarettes, and tranquilizers immediately following the accident. So not only do they claim that they evacuated to keep you safe, they also claim that any adverse side effects are alcohol, cigarettes, and tranquilizers induced. There were some increases in consumption of alcohol and cigarettes. This is an academic study, by the way. Don't you feel a lot better about scientists now? There's another study. Approximately 20 tons of the molten core material were relocated to the lower head of the reactor pressure vessel. So now they went from 2 tons to 20 tons melted down. 20 tons is significantly more than the 2 tons, so they're starting to head in the right direction. They're going to have to go 5 times that to get the true number. The legacy of 3 Mile Island, radiological consequences of the 3 Mile Island. There's a lot of studies, right, to cover up, and a lot of them's hid away, right? Radiation doses after 3 Mile Island. Again, you can't get access to any of those articles. Modeling evacuation behavior during the 3 Mile Island, which never started, and it was only for women and pregnant women and children below kindergartens of ages. The findings latest include the nuclear emergency evacuation behavior is predictable on the basis of location, lifestyle, social status, blah, 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 blah. So those people got a paycheck by putting out a study that makes the industry look good. It's just not, this is what I mean about it, right? So we got a poll tonight because of these types of studies, by the way. Was 3 Mile Island's deadly radioactive fallout harm omitted by heartless nuclear academics and professors? So I only got 100 digits that I can put there in the poll. An analyst of the hydrogen bubble concerns in 3. I'm not saying there wasn't a hydrogen bubble. I'm saying that's part of the meltdown. But they're trying to make it as if that was the only issue that they had. Right? So there's a lot of players putting out studies to confuse anybody trying to rationalize. The bubble was said to consist mainly of hydrogen. Hydrogen was created by zirconium cladding catching fire and burning, which, because it burns at around 1800 degrees, ignites to plutonium and uranium pellets, which burn at 9,000 degrees, which is why they had 300,000 pounds of the reactor that had to go into a nuclear vault. Well, they don't have a repository. Idaho doesn't have one. They're shipping their legacy waste to WIP, for God's sakes, for 12 years. The bubble was said to contain mainly of hydrogen, which is created by the meltdown itself. That's the hydrogen's conformation of the meltdown. Due to development of oxygen? No, it's caused by the zirconium cladding catching fire. Danger because they lost all the water, right? Danger of the explosion, and they done it to themselves. It doesn't matter how it happened. What matters is how many millions of people are suffering debilitating diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries because of it. Dangers of explosions was reported to be imminent. Yeah, because of the hydrogen. We analyzed all possible sources. I find it hard to believe they didn't have an explosion. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest they had an explosion. But because, they were telling people it's like drinking wine and cigarettes and like sunshine and everything else, it's really difficult to get a consensus on facts. And determined that a continuous, so you got to get everything you could find and then analyze it like I done. And determined that a continued growth of the bubble during several days after the accident was not possible. Well, if it melted down, then it's producing it constantly, so it is possible. Our main conclusion was the following. Most of the initial hydrogen in the bubble was produced by the reactions. It's supposed to be zirconium cladding and the superheated water. Superheated water. Well, if you introduce oxygen or a spark there, it'll detonate, right? Just introducing oxygen into that environment will cause it to detonate. Regulators and legislators mobilizing for 3 Mile Island disaster that wasn't. There's, like I say, in the nuclear industry, there's more than enough scumbags to go around for everybody. Incredibly, the fictional film The China Syndrome, starring Jane Fonda, Michael Douglas, and Jack Lemmon, was released depicting the exact scenario just days before the nuclear meltdown started. Incredibly, but true. This China Syndrome. And of course, they didn't really, when you watch that show, they're still far off the mark on what really is the China Syndrome, right? Half of the core melted down in the early stages of the accident, with an hour to go until a complete meltdown. However, the engineers started the water flow again, cooling down the uranium enough to avert total loss. Now they're saying half the reactor core melted down in that study. Was that a study or that a story? I lost track. That's a study. Half the reactor core melted down in the early stages of the accident. So now you're talking 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Now it makes sense why 300,000 pounds of the reactor structure had to be taken with the 200,000 pounds of the reactor core to Idaho National Laboratory, which is one great big disease factory, 890 square mile disease factory, right? And so the reactors normally need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. So 4,500 tons a minute is, think of 4,500 pickup trucks a minute. So our poll was 3 Mile Island's deadly radioactive fallout omitted by the heartless, disgusting nuclear academics and professors? Why, yes, it was, Dana. We got 50%, 50 votes, 98% got first prizes. What I got done here? Half of the reactor core melted down in the early stages of the accident. Well, you know what they say about a nuclear meltdown? It never stops. So 2 million people around 3 Mile Island during the meltdown received a milligram above the usual dose of radioactivities. No, it's absurd to suggest that you're getting hit by shine and gamma without inhaling physical atoms, which is atomic decays. And so the plane that flew over it was showing around 1.8 million becquerels, I'm assuming per square meter. They're talking about 2 million people got radioactive doses, but it was equal to a milliliter, the same as natural. But it's not the same as natural. This is atoms that are floating around like snow floats around. These atoms float around. Except they're not as big as snow. You can't see it or hear it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or whatever. You can't perceive it. So that's quite the revelation. To come out and claim 2 million people got radiation. Remember the story before where they say, yeah, but it's like watching color television for an extra year. Which, the lowest form of life imaginable. And, like, what else am I supposed to say? Do I just say, well, that's pretty dishonest and then just move on? No, it's despicable. Because you disarm people from taking appropriate action and getting out of harm's way, like Dick Thornburgh. Dick Thornburgh should be dug up, because he's dead. He should be dug up, and they should use baseball bats to pulverize whatever remains of him. And then he should be taken away and just dumped in a landfill because he doesn't deserve to be buried in a graveyard. Like most nuclear people, he's a degenerate mass murdering scumbag. And that's not up for debate. So there's just 2 million people, a milligram, which is 1,000 microsieverts. So 1,000 microsieverts. Well, it looks better if I bring it up on the screen anyway. And we're gonna lowball it. So you got 1,000 microsieverts, and each microsiever is 150 atoms. So each person breathed in 150,000 atoms. And every one of them is going to be attacked for the rest of their life with white blood cells. So it's like having 150,000 cuts on your body that never heal up. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, and it tries to build a tumor around it. These are physical atoms that are in your body pulsing energy every second. So now your immune system is compromised. But the numbers are infinitely worse than that. Right? And we're talking 2 million people. Guaranteed every one of them got sick, some kind of illness, some kind of health issue. Cancer is just one of 1,800 diseases. It disturbs me. Public fear and distrust increased. Is anybody actually surprised? 2 million people around 3 Mile Island during the meltdown received only one milligram. Only 1 milligram. All the farms around these places is completely surrounded by water. And the victims were moved locally. They couldn't get out of harm's way. And everybody had the moral compass to protest. But you don't want to go to a nuclear meltdown and protest, right? Go somewhere else and protest next time. Please don't go doing stuff like that again. If that's what it looks like when you're walking down the road, you need to move out of there immediately. And here's the nuclear company gave Buddy this Geiger counter so he can go around and show everybody how safe it was. Do you really think that this is going to work? Do you really think they would do something like that if it actually worked? The one thing they're good at is telling you lies. This, what's her name? Linda Ronstadt or something? I got no idea. No, you did not survive 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. A plant, like, first off, it's not a mishap. It's not a leak. It's nuclear power plant has a meltdown. leaks radiation. New York Post. Well, you can count on New York Post. New York Post, it got you. And the Patriot, the opposite of being a patriot, claims radiation being vented. This was a meltdown. This was half the reactor core melted down early on. This is 500,000 pounds. 500,000. 500,000 pounds of nuclear, 200,000 pounds of nuclear fuel, 300,000 pounds of reactor that is melted through, because that's the only reason you're going to remove it like that under those contexts. Cancer incidences. Among men and women, there's no evidence of increased risk for cancers. All those people, that's how they pay their bills, by lying to you and stabbing you in the back. 3 Mile Island stress effect. Worry and fear about possible exposure of radiation was prevalent throughout the cleanup and the restart of the reactors, and persisted. Well, one of the reactors they restarted, but not the melted one, and persisted for over a decade later. The year of near disaster at 3 Mile Island. This is 100. Look at all these academic studies designed to manipulate you. Reactor disassembly activities at 3 Mile Island Unit 2. Child and parent reaction. This is academic child psychiatry. Child and parent reaction to 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. And so a lot of these, 4 of the children were psychiatrically disturbed, showed significant higher low intensity of reaction levels. So this is common though. All nuclear accidents, they'll try to blame all your health issues on fear mongering. And stress. Yeah, really disappointing. And so we'll let it go there, I guess. This is not how you clean up a nuclear meltdown, by the way. Where's that picture of everybody running towards the nuclear meltdown? I'm going to get that and frame it and put it on my wall. Here's what well-disciplined victims look like. Because that's... Where's the tool? No, I saved it right there. Hang on. Yeah, that picture, it doesn't crack me up, it haunts me. Bear with me, I'll find it. Because I got so much, right? Because if I don't laugh, I'll start screaming, right? Well, we had a power outage earlier, then we had a power outage during the show. And I had bought surge protectors for my equipment, thank goodness. But rule number 1 of a nuclear meltdown is don't do something like that. Don't run to the danger. So, where's the poll? Let's bring up the poll one more time. Was 3 Mile Island's deadly radioactive fallout effects omitted by the heartless nuclear academics and the professors? Well, hell, yeah, that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. That was a great poll. I appreciate everybody participating in the poll. Thank you, Dana Nasana, for moderating. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Yeah. Yeah, good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Yeah, 44 year. Kevin Blanche is in the house. Hi, Kevin. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. It's Thursday night. I didn't get a show last night. I didn't have it in me. I was there. I had everything laid out to do the show, and everything ready to do the preamble. All I had to do was click enter, and the preamble would have showed up. And I couldn't do it. I delayed doing it because I didn't feel that I was going to be able to do a show. And because we've done 6 shows last week, right? And then had a day off and then started again, and I think it just caught up to me, basically. Okay, we'll see everybody for the last shows tomorrow night. Have a great night. A great night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for you, my loved ones. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. There's some technical issues earlier on in the show. So, those who made their way through it, thank you. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow. Take care, folks. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Good night, everybody.